A blinding flash in a cliffside studio, and Elias Thorne, master photographer, lies dead, a poisoned dart in his neck, a locked door, and a missing African blowpipe. Hercule Poirot unravels a web of blackmail, betrayal, and a shadowy figure, caught in a mirror's reflection. Was it the scorned wife, the desperate partner, or the vengeful lover? The camera saw it all, but the truth hides a twist. The dart was a lie, and the real killer struck with a silent poison. Can Poirot's little grey cells expose the mastermind before the final negative fades to black? Chapter 1. The fatal flash. The mist hung low over the Sussex cliffs, a gossamer veil that softened the jagged edges of the coastline where the English Channel churned restlessly below. It was a morning in late autumn, the air sharp with the promise of frost, and the dawn light struggled to pierce the haze that clung to the village of St. Albans by the sea. At the cliff's edge stood a solitary stone building, its tall windows glinting like the eyes of a watchful sentinel. This was the studio of Elias Thorne, the photographer whose name was synonymous with artistry that bordered on obsession. His work portraits that seemed to capture not just faces but souls had graced the galleries of London and Paris. Yet his temperament was as tempestuous as the sea below his perch. On this particular morning, Thorne had declared he would create his masterpiece. A series of portraits titled The Final Shot. It was a declaration that had drawn a small, eclectic group to his cliffside manor, each guest bound to Thorne by ties of admiration, rivalry, or resentment. The studio itself was a marvel of organized chaos. Tripods stood like sentinels, their brass fittings gleaming under the soft glow of gas lamps. Shelves groaned under the weight of glass plates, bottles of developing chemicals, and exotic artifacts from Thorne's travels, ivory carvings from India, a jade idol from China, and, most curiously, a slender African blowpipe mounted on a mahogany stand, its tip sharpened to a menacing point. The blowpipe was Thorne's pride, acquired during a youthful expedition to the Congo. A relic, he claimed, was imbued with the spirit of adventure. The room smelled of collodion and ambition, a heady mix that seemed to fuel Thorne's frenetic energy as he adjusted his antique camera. A monstrous contraption of wood and bellows that dominated the center of the space. Elias Thorne was a man of 50, though his lean frame and piercing blue eyes gave him the vigor of youth. His hair, once jet black, was now streaked with silver, swept back from a high forehead that bespoke intellect and arrogance. He wore a velvet smoking jacket, its deep burgundy clashing with the utilitarian smock beneath, a sartorial nod to his dual nature as artist and showman. This, he proclaimed to the gathered company, his voice resonant with theatrical flair, will be my legacy. The final shot will redefine portraiture. Each of you my muses, my rivals will be in a way the world has never seen. The assembled group was a study in contrasts. Lydia Thorne, his estranged wife, stood by the window, her faded beauty accentuated by the morning light. A former actress, her chestnut curls were pinned loosely, and her emerald gown clung to a figure still graceful despite years of bitterness. She sipped a glass of sherry, her lips tight, as if swallowing words she dared not speak. Beside her, Reginald Hale, Thorne's business partner, adjusted his pince nez spectacles. His thin frame swathed in a tailored suit that screamed London wealth. Hale's fingers twitched nervously, betraying a man accustomed to ledgers, but uneasy. In the presence of genius or madness, Clara Voss, Thorne's assistant, hovered near the camera, her youthful face pale but determined. At 20, she was an enigma, her dark eyes darting between Thorne and the equipment, as if memorizing every detail of this momentous day. Victor Lang, a rival photographer whose name was often whispered in the same breath as Thorne's, leaned against a wall, his heavy brows furrowed in disdain. His tweed jacket was rumpled, a deliberate contrast to Thorne's elegance, and his hands were stuffed deep in his pockets, as if restraining some unspoken grievance. Lastly, Lady Evelyn Carrington, a society matron whose wealth and scandalous reputation preceded her, sat on a velvet chaise, her pearls catching the light. Her liaison with Thorne was an open secret, though her cool smile suggested she cared little for gossip. The air was thick with anticipation as Thorne positioned his first subject, a simple antique vase, its porcelain etched with delicate vines. A test, he called it, to calibrate the light. The guests watched, some with curiosity, others with impatience, as he adjusted the lens, his movements precise yet feverish. The camera's bulb, a glass orb filled with magnesium powder, was primed to cast a blinding flash. Now, Thorne murmured, more to himself than the room, we capture eternity. The bulb ignited with a crack like lightning, bathing the studio in a momentary blaze of white. The vase gleamed, its curves stark against the dark backdrop. But as the light faded, a gasp shattered the silence. Clara Voss, standing closest to the camera, stumbled forward, her hand clutching her throat. "Mr. Thorne," she cried, her voice trembling. The others turned, their expressions shifting from boredom to horror. Elias Thorne was slumped over the tripod, his face ashen, his eyes wide in a frozen stare. From his neck protruded a slender dart, its fletching quivering slightly, as if still alive with malice. The dart bore the unmistakable carvings of the African blowpipe, now missing from its stand. Chaos erupted. Lydia dropped her sherry glass, the amber liquid pooling on the hardwood floor. Hale rushed to Thorne's side, only to recoil at the sight of the dart. Lang swore under his breath, his hands no longer in his pockets, but clenched into fists. Lady Carrington rose, her composure cracking as she whispered, "Elias." Clara, tears streaming down her face, fumbled with the studio door, which was locked from the inside, the key still in place. He was alone, she stammered. No one else was here. Reginald Hale, recovering his nerve, barked for someone to fetch the police. The village constable, a portly man named Dawkins, arrived within the hour, his face flushed from the climb up the cliff path. He surveyed the scene with a mix of awe and incompetence, muttering about foul play as he scribbled in a battered notebook. But the locked door, the exotic dart, and the absence of an obvious culprit baffled him. "This is beyond me," Dawkins admitted, mopping his brow. "We need Scotland Yard." By noon, Inspector Japp arrived, his familiar bulldog face set in a grim line. He took one look at the body, the dart, and the locked studio, then shook his head. "This is no village matter. This is a puzzle for the little grey cells." Without hesitation, he dispatched a telegram to London, summoning the one man whose intellect could unravel such a mystery. Hercule Poirot, the train from London to St. Albans was a rattling affair, its windows streaked with the remnants of the morning's mist. Hercule Poirot sat in a first-class compartment, his gloved hands folded over the silver head of his cane, his moustache meticulously waxed despite the early hour. The journey gave him time to reflect, his mind already turning over the sparse details Japp had provided in his urgent message. Photographer Elias Thorne, dead by poisoned dart, studio locked, suspects present. Come at once. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, glinted with curiosity. A dart from an African blowpipe, he mused aloud, startling a dozing passenger across from him. Most singular. And a locked room. The stage is set for a drama, n'est-ce pas? Upon arriving at St. Alban's station, Poirot was met by Japp, whose usual brusque manner was tempered by relief. "Poirot, thank heavens you're here," Japp said, clapping him on the shoulder. "This one's a right mess. Thorne was alone when it happened, or so they say. Door locked, windows bolted, and that blasted dart sticking out of his neck like a porcupine quill." "Calm yourself, mon ami," Poirot replied, adjusting his Homburg hat. "The facts, they will speak if we listen. Take me to this studio of death." The cliffside manor was a Gothic pile, its turrets and gables looming against the grey sky. The studio, a separate structure connected by a covered walkway, was cordoned off by Dawkins, who stood guard with the air of a man out of his depth. Inside, the scene was much as Clara had described. Thorne's body, now covered with a sheet, lay beside the camera, which stood like a silent witness. The blowpipe stand was empty, its absence glaring. Poirot's eyes roamed the room, taking in every detail. The scattered glass plates, the faint chemical temps, the vase still poised on its pedestal. He knelt beside the body, lifting the sheet with a delicate hand. The dart, no longer quivering, was embedded deep, its carvings intricate and unmistakable. "Curare, I presume?" Poirot asked Japp, who nodded grimly. "The local doctor thinks so. Deadly stuff. Takes effect in seconds if it hits the bloodstream, and the blowpipe missing. We've searched the studio, the manor, even the cliffs. Nothing." Poirot's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "Then we must search, not just with the eyes, but with the mind." He turned to the camera, its lens glinting faintly. "This, I think, will tell us something." The final shot, it was taken. Clara, who had been hovering nearby, nodded. "Yes, sir. The plate was exposed. It's in the darkroom, waiting to be developed. Bon, let us see what Monsieur Thorne captured in his last moment." The darkroom was a cramped, windowless space, its walls lined with shelves of chemicals and trays of developing fluid. Clara, her hands trembling only slightly, guided Poirot and Japp through the process. The negative, still damp from its initial rinse, was clipped to a line. Under the red glow of a safe light, Poirot watched as Clara submerged the plate in developer, the image slowly emerging like a ghost from the ether. The vase appeared first, its lines crisp and elegant, but in the background, faint and blurred, was something else, a reflection in a mirror propped against the wall. It was indistinct, but Poirot's keen eyes detected the outline of a figure, perhaps a shoulder, perhaps a hat, standing outside the studio window. "Mon Dieu," whispered. "The camera, it sees what the human eye misses. This reflection, it is our first clue." Japp squinted at the negative. Could be anyone or nothing. A trick of the light. No, no, my friend. The light, it does not lie, but people. They lie always. Poirot turned to Clara, Mademoiselle, who was in the studio when the flash occurred. "No one, sir," she insisted. "Mr. Thorne sent us all out. He wanted to work alone for the test shot. I was in the corridor, waiting to assist. The others were in the manor's drawing room, and the door was locked. Yes, I tried. When I heard the gasp, I had to use the spare key to get in." Poirot nodded, his mind already spinning a web of possibilities. A locked room, a poisoned dart, a missing blowpipe, and a shadow in a photograph. The stage was indeed set, and the players were waiting. The manor's drawing room was a cavernous space, its walls adorned with thorns, photographs, portraits of aristocrats, landscapes of distant lands, and one striking image of a Congo riverbank, its waters dark and foreboding. The suspects were gathered, their faces a gallery of emotions. Lydia's tight-lipped resentment, Hale's nervous fidgeting, Clara's quiet grief, Lang's smouldering anger, and Lady icy detachment. Poirot entered with Japp, his small frame commanding the room with an authority that belied his stature. "Madame Etemasias," he began, his voice clear and precise, "we are here to unravel a tragedy. Monsieur Thorne is dead, struck by a dart from his own collection in a room locked from within. I, Hercule Poirot, will find the truth, but I require your cooperation. Each of you was here this morning. Each of you had a connection to the victim. Let us begin." Lydia Thorne spoke first, her voice low but steady. "I was in the garden when it happened. I needed Aurelius's theatrics was suffocating. We've been separated for years. You... No, he was a tyrant, always chasing his next obsession. But murder, I had no reason to kill him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "No reason, madame. Separation, it can breed bitterness, and money. It is often a motive." She flushed, but held his gaze. "He cut me off long ago. I live on my own income now." Reginald Hale cleared his throat, his spectacles glinting. "I was in the drawing room, discussing business with Lady Carrington. Thorne and I had our disagreements, but our partnership was profitable. His death gains me nothing. Disagreements?" Poirot pressed. "Of what nature?" "Creative differences," Hale said quickly. "He spent money like water. I managed the books." Clara Voss, twisting a handkerchief, spoke softly. "I was outside the studio, waiting for Mr. Thorne's instructions. He was particular about his work. I heard the flash, then a strange sound, a gasp, like he was choking. I ran to the door, but it was locked. When I got in, he was gone." Victor Lang's voice cut through the room, sharp with contempt. "I was in the guest room, nursing a headache. Thorne's ego gave me one every time I visited. He stole my ideas, my clients. But I didn't need to kill him to prove I'm better." Lady Carrington's laugh was like the tinkle of crystal. "And I, Mr. Poirot, was here with Mr. Hale. Elias was a charming man, but reckless. Our friendship was no secret, but it was hardly a motive for murder." Poirot smiled thinly. "We shall see, madame. The heart, it hides many secrets." The afternoon waned, and the mist thickened outside, cloaking the cliffs in an eerie silence. Poirot returned to the studio, his cane tapping rhythmically as he circled the camera. The blowpipe's absence gnawed at him. Why take it? To hide it? Or to use it again? He examined the collection cabinet, its glass door ajar. No fingerprints but Thorne's, according to Japp's men. A curious detail, suggesting either carelessness or cunning. He moved to the window, its heavy bolts secure. The reflection in the photograph had come from outside, yet the window was locked. "Impossible," Japp muttered, following Poirot's gaze. "Unless someone climbed the cliff face. Or," Poirot said softly, "the impossible is merely a matter of perspective." He turned to the camera again, its lens like an unblinking eye. "Mademoiselle Voss," he called, summoning Clara. "This camera, it was prepared by you." "Yes, sir," she said. "I loaded the plate and checked the bulb. Everything was perfect, and the flash, it was bright, blinding, she confirmed. Mr. Thorne insisted on maximum exposure. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The flash, the dart, the reflection, they were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture was not yet clear. He needed more facts, more lies, more truths hidden in the shadows as evening fell. Poirot sat in the manor's library, a fire crackling in the grate. Japp joined him, his face weary. We've searched every inch of this place. No blood, no other darts. The curare came from Thorne's own stock. He kept a vial in the cabinet for artistic experiments, he called it. Experiments, Poirot repeated, his fingers steepled. A dangerous hobby. Tell me, Japp, what do we know of Thorne's past? Not much, Japp admitted. He was a big name in photography, but before that, a blank slate, rumors of travel Africa, Asia, but nothing solid. Then we must dig, mon ami. The past, it is like a photograph. Developed slowly, it reveals all. Poirot's thoughts returned to the reflection in the negative. A figure outside, yet the studio was sealed. A dart from a blowpipe that was not used. A locked door, a dead man, and a room full of suspects, each with a motive as sharp as the dart itself. The game was afoot, and Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells, would expose the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried. Chapter 2. The arrival of the little grey cells. Train from London to St. Albans by the sea rattled through the Sussex countryside, its rhythm a counterpoint to the restless thoughts of Hercule Poirot. He sat alone in a first-class compartment, his gloved hands resting lightly on the ebony handle of his cane, his green eyes half closed but missing nothing. The mist that had cloaked the cliffs at dawn had thickened into a grey shroud, blurring the fields and hedgerows beyond the window. Poirot's mind, however, was sharp as a lens. Already focusing on the sparse details Inspector Japp had telegraphed, a photographer dead by a poisoned dart, a locked studio, a missing blowpipe, and a handful of suspects bound by secrets. A puzzle most intricate, Poirot murmured, adjusting his Homburg hat. The stage is set, and the players await. The station at St. Albans was a modest affair, its platform slick with damp from the sea air. Japp stood waiting, his overcoat flapping in the wind, his face a familiar blend of determination and exasperation. Poirot, you're a sight for sore eyes, he said, gripping the detective's hand. This case is a devil's brew. Elias Thorne struck down in his own studio, door locked, no one in or out, and that dart straight out of some jungle. Tale, calm yourself, mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice smooth as polished glass. The facts, they are like the pieces of a mosaic. We shall arrange them, and the picture will emerge. Take me to this place of death. The cliffside manor loomed ahead, its gothic silhouette stark against the churning sky. The studio, a stone structure detached from the main house, stood like a fortress, its tall windows reflecting the weak afternoon light. Constable Dawkins, still guarding the entrance, saluted awkwardly as Japp and Poirot approached. No one's touched a thing, sir, he said, his voice tinged with relief at the arrival of greater authority. Inside, the studio was a frozen tableau of tragedy. Elias Thorne's body, now respectfully covered with a white sheet, lay beside the antique camera, its wooden frame and brass fittings untouched since the fatal flash. The air carried the faint bite of photographic chemicals, mingled with the salt temps of the sea. Shelves lined the walls, cluttered with glass plates, bottles of developer, and curios from Thorne's travels. Poirot's eyes lingered on the empty stand where the African blowpipe had once rested, its absence a silent accusation. "Show me the body, if you please," Poirot said, his tone brisk but not unkind. Japp lifted the sheet, revealing Thorne's ashen face, the dart still embedded in his neck. The carvings on its shaft were intricate, a spiral of symbols that matched the blowpipe's design. Poirot leaned closer, his moustache twitching slightly. "Curare, you said?" Japp nodded. Dr. Hargrove, the local man, confirmed it. "Deadly in moments if it hits a vein." Thorne kept a vial of the stuff in that cabinet. He pointed to a glass-fronted case in the corner, its door slightly ajar. Poirot examined the cabinet, noting the absence of fingerprints other than Thorne's, as reported by Japp's men. "Curious," he mused. "The murderer, they are careful, or they wish us to think so." He turned to the camera, its lens gleaming faintly under the gaslight. "This instrument, it was used for the final shot. Clara Voss, who had been hovering near the door, stepped forward. Her dark eyes were red-rimmed, but her voice was steady. "Yes, Mr. Poirot." Mr. Thorne took a test shot of the vase before the portraits. The plates in the darkroom, undeveloped. "Bon, we shall see what it reveals. But first, tell me, Mademoiselle Voss, the sequence of events." "Precisely." Clara clasped her hands, her knuckles whitening. "Mr. Thorne sent everyone out of the studio at 7:30. He wanted to work alone for the test shot. I waited in the corridor, ready to assist. The others, Mrs. Thorne, Mr. Hale, Mr. Lang, and Lady Carrington, were in the drawing room. I heard the flash, then a strange sound, like a choke or a gasp. I tried the door, but it was locked. I fetched the spare key from the hook in the hall and got in. That's when I saw him." "Like that?" Poirot nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. The windows, tall and narrow, were bolted shut, their heavy iron latches undisturbed. The door, solid oak, showed no signs of tampering. "A locked room," he said softly, "yet death found a way." "Most intriguing," Japp snorted. "Intriguing? It's impossible. No one could have got in or out without being seen. And that blowpipe vanished into thin air." "Not thin air, mon ami," Poirot corrected, tapping his cane on the floor. "Nothing vanishes. It is hidden, or it is misdirection. We shall find it." The darkroom was a claustrophobic chamber, its walls blackened to block out light, its air heavy with the scent of fixer and silver nitrate. Clara led the way, her movements practiced despite her evident strain. A single red safe light cast an eerie glow, illuminating trays of chemicals and a line where the exposed plate hung, still. "DAMP." Poirot watched as Clara carefully submerged the plate in developer, her hands steady now, as if the routine anchored her. Slowly, the image emerged. The antique vase, its porcelain curves stark against a velvet backdrop. But in the background, caught in a mirror propped against the wall, was a faint, blurred shaper figure, perhaps. Standing outside the window, Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Voila, the camera. It is the silent witness. This reflection, mademoiselle, it is not nothing, it is someone." Japp peered over his shoulder, squinting. Could be a trick of the light, or one of the guests, standing outside earlier. "No, Poirot said, his voice firm. "The light, it does not play tricks, it reveals. This figure was present at the moment of the flash. We must discover who." Clara frowned, her brow creasing. "But the window was locked, sir." "I checked it myself after I found him." "Locked, yes," Poirot said, "But locks, they are not always what they seem. Tell me, who had access to the studio before the shot?" "Only Mr. Thorne and me," Clara said. "I prepared the camera and the plate, but he locked the door when he sent me out. No one else came in." Poirot nodded, filing the information. "Away, and the blowpipe, it was here, in the cabinet." "Yes, I saw it that morning when I dusted the shelves. It was there, right until he sent us out." Japp scratched his head. "Then how the devil did it get used? And where is it now?" "We've turned this place upside down." Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "Patience, Japp. The blowpipe, it will reveal itself when we understand why it was taken." The Manor's drawing room was a stark contrast to the studio's austerity. Its walls were hung with Thorne's photographs, each a testament to his skill. A duchess in mourning, her eyes haunting. A desert caravan, its shadows stark. A portrait of Lydia Thorne in her acting days, her smile radiant but tinged with melancholy. The suspects were gathered, their postures betraying their unease. Lydia sat by a window, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her emerald gown catching the firelight. Reginald Hale paced near the hearth, his pince-nez slipping down his nose. Victor Lang slouched in an armchair, his heavy brows knitted in a scowl. Lady Evelyn Carrington perched on a chaise, her pearls gleaming, her expression one of studied calm. Clara stood apart, near the door, as if ready to flee. Poirot entered with Japp, his small frame radiating authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured, "we are here to unravel a mystery most perplexing. Monsieur Elias Thorne is dead, killed by a dart poisoned with curare, in a room locked from within. The weapon, an African blowpipe, is missing. Yet the camera has given us a clue, reflection of someone outside the studio. I, Hercule Poirot, will find the truth, but I require your candor. Let us begin with your movements this morning." Lydia spoke first, her voice low but steady. "I was in the garden, walking the paths. Elias's theatrics were exhausting, and I needed air. We've been apart for years, Mr. Poirot. His death changes nothing for me." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "Nothing, madame. Separation, it can leave scars. And there is the matter of money, perhaps." Lydia's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. "I have my own income from investments. Elias cut me off long ago. If anything, his death complicates things." Reginald Hale stopped pacing, adjusting his spectacles. "I was here, in the drawing room, discussing investments with Lady Carrington. Thorne and I had our differences, creative ones, mostly. He spent recklessly, but our business was sound. His death is a loss, not a gain." "Creative differences," Poirot pressed, his tone mild but probing. "Or financial ones?" Hale hesitated, then shrugged. "Both, I suppose. He borrowed heavily against our profits, but murder, absurd." Victor Lang's voice was a low growl. "I was in the guest room, head pounding. Thorne's arrogance was enough to make anyone ill. He stole my techniques, my clients, but I didn't need to kill him to outshine him." Poirot tilted his head. "And yet, Monsieur Lang, rivalry. It is a powerful motive. You were alone, you say." "The maid saw me," Lang snapped. "Ask her." Lady Carrington's smile was cool, her voice like silk. "I was here, with Mr. Hale. Elias was a brilliant man, but reckless. Our friendship was no secret, but it gave me no reason to wish him harm." Poirot's gaze lingered on her. "Friendship, madame, or something deeper?" The heart, it can be a dangerous thing. Her smile didn't waver. You're a romantic, Mr. Poirot, but I assure you, my heart is my own. Clara, when prompted, repeated her story, her voice barely above a whisper. I was outside the studio, waiting. I heard the flash, the gasp, and then nothing. I unlocked the door and found him. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing every word, every gesture. Mercy, we shall speak again. For now, I ask you to remain here at the manor. The truth, it is close, but it hides in the shadows. As twilight deepened, the mist outside thickened, muffling the crash of waves below. Poirot returned to the studio, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. He stood before the camera, its lens like an unblinking eye. You saw something, he murmured, as if addressing it. You captured a moment of truth, but what? He examined the window again, its bolts solid, its glass unmarred. The reflection in the photograph suggested someone outside, yet the locked room defied logic. He moved to the cabinet, its contents undisturbed, save for the missing blowpipe. A vial of curare sat on a shelf, its label faded but legible. A dangerous toy, Poirot said, his fingers hovering over the glass. Why keep such a thing? Japp joined him, his face etched with frustration. We've searched the grounds, the cliffs, even the servants' quarters. No sign of that blowpipe, and the curare it's Thorne's own supply, no question. But how did it get on the dart? Poirot's eyes gleamed. That, mon ami, is the question. Not how, but why. The dart, the blowpipe, the locked door, they are pieces of a performance. We must understand the script. He turned to the mirror, its surface now reflecting only the dim studio. The photograph's shadow haunted him, a figure, fleeting but real. Someone was here, he said softly. Someone who wished to be unseen. But the camera, it does not lie. In the manor's library, Poirot sat by the fire, a cup of tisane in hand. Japp slumped in a chair opposite, his notebook open but unused. What do you make of them, Poirot? A bitter wife, a greedy partner, a jealous rival, a jilted lover, and a girl who's more than she seems. Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression serene. They are all players, Japp, each with a role. But the script, it is written by one or perhaps two. The reflection in the photograph, it is our key. We must find who stood outside, and why they wished to be invisible. Japp sighed. And the blowpipe, if we find it, we find the killer. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice soft but certain. Or perhaps the blowpipe is not the weapon at all. The mind, Japp, is the true weapon. And mine, it is already at work. The fire crackled, casting long shadows across the room, outside. The sea roared, and the mist pressed closer, as if guarding the secrets of St. Alban's by the sea. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with purpose, piecing together the mosaic of a murder most artful. Chapter 3. Shadows in the dark room. The twilight deepened over St. Alban's by the sea, casting the cliffside manor in a shroud of grey that seemed to seep into its very walls. Within the stone studio, where Elias Thorne had met his end, the air was heavy with the lingering scent of collodion and the weight of unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot stood in the dark room, his small frame silhouetted against the red glow of the safe light, his green eyes fixed on the glass plate that held Thorne's. Final shot. The image of the antique vase was clear, its delicate vines etched in silver nitrate, but it was the blurred reflection in the mirror shadowy figure outside the window that held Poirot's attention. The camera, he murmured, It is like the mind of Poirot. It sees what others overlook. Inspector Japp, leaning against the doorframe, rubbed his temples. That shadow, Poirot, it's a ghost, for all we know. The window was bolted, the door locked. How could anyone be out there? Poirot's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. A ghost, mon ami. Non. It is a person, flesh and blood, who stood where they should not. We must learn why. He turned to Clara Voss, who hovered nearby, her hands twisting a damp cloth. Mademoiselle, you are certain no one entered the studio before the shot? Clara nodded, her dark eyes wide but steady. I swear it, Mr. Poirot. Mr. Thorne was particular possessive, even. He locked the door himself after sending us out. I was in the corridor, not 10 feet away, and the window. Poirot pressed, his voice gentle but probing. You checked it after? Yes, sir, bolted tight, like always. No one could have got in or out. Poirot nodded, his gaze returning to the negative. Then we must consider the impossible, for it is often the possible in disguise. He stepped back, his cane tapping softly on the stone floor. Let us return to the manor. The suspects, they await, and their words, they will reveal more than they intend. The drawing room was a stage of simmering tensions, its high ceilings and ornate chandelier doing little to dispel the unease that hung over the gathered company. The fire in the hearth cast flickering shadows, dancing across the faces of Lydia Thorne, Reginald Hale, Victor Lang, Lady Evelyn Carrington, and Clara Voss. Each sat or stood in their own orbit, as if physical distance could shield them from suspicion. Poirot entered with Japp, his polished shoes silent on the thick carpet, his presence commanding attention despite his diminutive stature. Madame et messieurs, he began, his voice clear as a bell, we have a mystery that grows more complex. A man is dead, a dart in his neck, a blowpipe missing, and a shadow captured where none should be. I ask you now to recount your morning once more, with precision. The truth, it hides in the details. Lydia Thorne, seated by the window, her emerald gown catching the firelight, spoke first. Her voice was low, tinged with the wariness of one long accustomed to scrutiny. I've told you, Mr. Poirot. I was in the garden, walking the rose path. Elias's theatrics were unbearable, and I needed solitude. I heard nothing until Clara's scream. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, studied her. The garden, madame, it is close to the studio. You saw no one near the window? No. One, Lydia said firmly. The mist was thick, but I'd have noticed anyone skulking about. Skulking, Poirot repeated, savouring the word. A curious choice. And yet, someone was there, reflected in Monsieur Thorne's final shot. Reginald Hale, standing near the hearth, adjusted his pince-nez with a nervous flick. I was here with Lady Carrington, as I said. We were discussing investments, nothing to do with Elias's nonsense. His death is a shock, but it doesn't change our business. Poirot tilted his head. Business, Monsieur Hale? Yet I understand Monsieur Thorne had debts. Debts, they constrain even the strongest partnership. Hale's jaw tightened. He spent freely, yes. I managed the accounts to keep us solvent. Murdering him would have ruined everything. Victor Lang, slouched in an armchair, snorted. Thorne was a thief, stealing my ideas and passing them off as his own. But I was in the guest room, head splitting. Ask the maid. She brought me tea at 7. Poirot's gaze lingered on Lang, noting the faint tremor in his hands. A headache, Monsieur Lang, or perhaps anger, simmering too long. Lang's eyes flashed. Think what you like. I didn't need to kill him to prove I'm the better. Artist, Lady Evelyn Carrington, poised on the chaise, offered a smile that was all polish and no warmth. I was here with Mr. Hale, as he said. Elias was a genius, but reckless. Our acquaintance was no secret, but it gave me no cause to harm him. Acquaintance, Poirot echoed, his tone mild but pointed. And yet, Madame Lavore, its betrayal can be a motive as old as time. Her pearls glinted as she tilted her head. You're a poet, Mr. Poirot, but I assure you, my heart is not so easily swayed. Clara Voss, standing near the door, spoke last, her voice barely audible. I was outside the studio, waiting. I heard the flash, then that awful gasp. I unlocked the door and found him, dead. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing every inflection, every glance. Mercy, you have given me much to consider. But know this, the truth, it cannot hide forever. Back in the studio, Poirot moved. With the precision of a watchmaker, his cane tracing arcs on the floor as he circled the camera. The reflection in the photograph gnawed at him, a figure outside a bolted window, in a locked room where a man had died. He examined the window again, its iron bolts cold to the touch, its glass unmarred. Impossible, Japp muttered, trailing behind. Unless someone scaled the cliff, and even then, how'd they get the dart inside? Poirot's eyes gleamed. The dart, mon ami, it is not the whole story. Consider Curari kills swiftly, yet the gasp Mademoiselle Voss heard suggests a struggle, a moment of awareness. We must look beyond the obvious. He turned to the collection cabinet, its glass door still ajar. The vial of Curari sat on a shelf, its label faded but intact. This poison, Poirot said, it was Thorne's own. Why keep such a thing? For art or for protection? Japp shrugged. He was eccentric. Called it an artistic experiment. Said it inspired his work. Eccentric, Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful, or perhaps calculated. Let us see what else this room holds. He moved to a cluttered desk in the corner, its surface strewn with papers, lenses, and a small leather-bound notebook. Flipping through it, Poirot found Thorne's meticulous notes on his photographic process, formulas for developers, sketches of poses, and, curiously, a list of names: Lydia, Hale, Lang, Carrington, Voss. Beside each was a cryptic note: debts, secrets, rivalry, betrayal, legacy. Poirot's moustache twitched. Mon Dieu, our photographer was not just an artist. He was a collector of secrets. Japp peered over his shoulder. Blackmail, you think? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or leverage. Thorne, he knew things about his circle. Things worth killing for. The evening brought a storm, its wind howling across the cliffs, rattling the manor's windows. Poirot sat in the library, a cup of tisane steaming beside him, as he reviewed the notebook. Japp paced, his boots scuffing the rug. That reflections. Driving me mad, Japp said. If someone was outside, they'd need to be a ghost to get past those bolts. Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression serene. Not a ghost, Japp, but a clever mind. The reflection, it is our guide. We must ask, who had reason to stand outside, unseen? And why use a dart when a simpler method might suffice? Japp stopped, pacing. You think the dart's a distraction? I think, Poirot said, that nothing in this case is what it seems. The blowpipe is missing, yet the dart remains. The room is locked, yet a shadow appears. We are dealing with a mind that plays with perception, like a photographer with light. He opened the notebook again, his finger tracing the word beside Clara Voss's name. Legacy. Mademoiselle Voss, he said softly. She is more than an assistant. There is a connection to Thorne, deeper than we know. Japp frowned. She's just a girl, Poirot. Devoted to him, maybe, but a killer. Not a killer, perhaps, Poirot said, but a key. Tomorrow, we shall dig deeper into Thorne's past, into these secrets. The little grey cells, they are stirring. As the storm raged outside, Poirot retired to his guest room, a small chamber overlooking the cliffs. He stood at the window, watching the sea churn under the moon's pale light. The reflection in the photograph haunted him, a fleeting glimpse of truth in a case built on deception. Somewhere in the manor, among the suspects, lay the answer. And Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct, would find it, no matter how cleverly it was hidden. Chapter 4. The jealous lens. The storm that battered St. Alban's by the sea had spent its fury by morning, leaving behind a sky bruised with clouds and a sea that churned restlessly below the cliffs. The manor, perched like a sentinel above the waves, seemed to hold its breath. As Hercule Poirot descended the grand staircase, his patent leather shoes gleaming, his moustache impeccably waxed despite the early hour, the events of the previous day, the poisoned dart, the locked studio, the elusive shadow in the photograph, had set his little grey cells ablaze with questions. Today, he resolved, would bring clarity, for the truth, like a well-composed image, required only the right angle to be revealed. In the dining room, the suspects breakfasted in uneasy silence, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions. Lydia Thorne, her chestnut curls pinned tightly, toyed with a piece of toast, her eyes distant. Reginald Hale, his pince-nez slipping down his nose, scanned a newspaper with feigned interest. Victor Lang, his heavy brows furrowed, glowered at his coffee, while Lady Evelyn Carrington, draped in a silk shawl, sipped tea with the poise of a woman accustomed to scrutiny. Clara Voss, pale and quiet, served herself sparingly from the sideboard, her gaze flickering toward Poirot as he entered. With Inspector Japp, bon matin, Poirot greeted, his voice crisp as the morning air. I trust you have slept, though perhaps not well, with death so near. His words hung in the air, met with tight smiles and averted eyes. Today, we shall delve deeper into the mystery of Monsieur Thorne's final shot. The camera has spoken. Mise, Amos, and it tells of a shadow where none should be. Let us see what else it reveals. Japp, standing by the door, cleared his throat. We've got men searching the cliffs again for that blowpipe, but I'll wager it's long gone into the sea, maybe. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Wager not too quickly, mon ami, the blowpipe. It is a prop in this drama, but its absence is as telling as its presence. Let us proceed to the studio. The stone studio was colder now, the air heavy with the damp of the storm's aftermath. The antique camera stood sentinel, its lens catching the weak light filtering through the tall windows. Poirot circled it, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm, his mind retracing the sequence of Thorne's final moments. The empty stand where the African blowpipe had rested drew his gaze, its absence a puzzle within a puzzle. The dart, he murmured, it was placed with precision, yet the blowpipe is gone. Why remove the weapon but leave the wound? Japp, rummaging through a stack of photographic plates, shrugged. To throw us off, maybe. Make it look like some tribal ritual gone wrong. Poirot's lips curved slightly. Ritual, Japp. None. This is no ritual. This is calculation. The murderer wishes us to see one thing while they hide another. He turned to Clara Voss, who had followed them, her hands clasped tightly. Mademoiselle, you prepared the camera for the test shot. Oui, yes, sir, Clara said, her voice steady despite her pallor. I loaded the plate and checked the bulb. Mr. Thorne was particular, everything had to be perfect. And the mirror, Poirot gestured to the gilt-framed mirror leaning against the wall, its surface reflecting the room's clutter. It was placed there deliberately. Clara hesitated. Mr. Thorne positioned it himself. He said it added depth to the composition. Depth, Poirot repeated, his eyes narrowing. Or perhaps opportunity. The reflection of the shadow, it was no accident. Someone stood outside, knowing they might be seen, yet trusting the blur to conceal them. Japp frowned. But the window's bolted. Poirot, we've checked it twice. No one could have got out there without a ladder or wings. Wings, non-Poirot said, but cunning, oui. Let us examine this mirror more closely. He approached the mirror, its surface slightly tarnished but clear enough to have captured the fleeting figure. Running a gloved finger along its edge, he found a faint scratch, barely visible, as if something had been pressed against it. Interesting, he murmured. This mirror, it has seen more than we know. Back in the manor, Poirot requested a private audience with each suspect. Beginning with Victor Lang, the rival photographer sat in the library, his tweed jacket rumpled, his heavy brows casting shadows over his eyes. I've nothing new to say, Lang began, his voice gruff. I was in the guest room, head pounding. Thorne's ego was enough to make anyone sick. Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable. Monsieur Lang, you speak of sickness, yet I sense a deeper wound. Rivalry, it can fester like a poison. Tell me, what did Monsieur Thorne steal from you? Lang's jaw tightened. Everything. My techniques, my clients, my reputation. He passed off my soft focus method as his own, won awards for it. I confronted him last week, and he laughed, said I'd never match his genius. A motive, perhaps, Poirot said, his tone mild, but piercing. You were alone, you say, during the fatal shot. The maid saw me, Lang insisted, brought me tea at 7. Check with her, Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving Lang's face. And the blowpipe you know of Thorne's collection. Lang snorted. Everyone did. He paraded that thing like a trophy, said it was from some African adventure. I never cared for his stories. Yet stories, monsieur, they reveal truths. Merci for your time. Next, Poirot met Lady Evelyn Carrington in the conservatory, where she stood among exotic ferns, her pearls glinting in the diffused light. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice smooth as velvet, you seem determined to find scandal where there is none. Elias and I were friends, close friends, perhaps, but that is all. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. Madame, friendship is a delicate word. I have heard whispers of a deeper bond, one that Monsieur Thorne may have broken. Tell me, did he betray you? Her smile faltered, just for a moment. Elias was charming but fickle. Last night, at dinner, he dismissed our connection, called it a passing fancy. I was hurt, yes, but murder. I am no scorned lover from a penny dreadful. Nan, Poirot agreed, but you are a woman of means and secrets. The photograph, it shows a shadow outside the studio. Could it have been you, seeking to confront him? Her laugh was sharp, like breaking glass. I was with Mr. Hale. as I said, and scaling cliffs is hardly my pastime. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. We shall see, madame. The truth, it is like light, it finds its way. The afternoon brought a discovery. Japp, combing through Thorne's desk, unearthed a locked metal box, its surface scratched but sturdy. With Clara's help, they found the key in a hidden drawer. Inside were documents, financial records, letters, and a series of cryptic notes. One caught Poirot's eye, a ledger showing payments from Hale, marked repaid with interest. Alongside a scrawled note, Hale's secret London dealings. Another page mentioned Lang, with the words plagiarism proven. A third note, concerning Lady Carrington, read simply, Africa, 1895. Poirot's mustache twitched. Mon Dieu, our photographer was a keeper of secrets. This box, it is. A Pandora's trove. Japp whistled, blackmail. Then, Thorne was squeezing them all. Perhaps Poirot said, or perhaps he merely collected leverage, like photographs in an album. We must learn more of this Africa, 1895. Clara, standing nearby, paled slightly. Mr. Thorne rarely spoke of Africa, she said. Only that he hunted there years ago, before he took up photography. Hunted, Poirot repeated, his eyes sharp. And what, I wonder, was his prey? As evening fell, Poirot returned to the dark room, drawn by the need to study the fatal negative again. Under the safe light, the image of the vase was as clear as ever, but the shadow in the mirror seemed to shift, as if mocking his efforts. He traced the outline with a gloved finger, noting the faint suggestion of a hat or scarf. You were there, he whispered, but why? Japp joined him, his face weary. We've questioned the servants. The maid confirms Lang was in the guest room, but she didn't see him after 7. Hale and Carrington's alibis hold 2 footmen saw them in the drawing room. Lydia was in the garden, alone. Clara's story checks out. 201 saw her leave the corridor. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The alibis, they are too perfect, Japp. Like a photograph, carefully posed. We must shake the frame, see what falls out. He turned to the camera, its lens a silent witness. This machine, it captured more than a vase. It captured a moment of truth. Tomorrow we shall confront the past Thorne's past, and the secrets. He held the jealous lens, it sees all. Outside, the sea whispered its secrets, and the manor stood silent, its inhabitants bound by suspicion and fear. Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, piecing together a puzzle where every shadow held a clue. Chapter 5. Whispers of the past. The morning broke over St. Alban's by the sea with a reluctant sun, its rays struggling through a veil of clouds that clung to the Sussex cliffs. The manor, perched precariously above the churning sea, seemed to exhale a sigh of secrets, its stone walls absorbing the weight of the previous day's revelations. Hercule Poirot, his attire as immaculate as ever, descended to the dining room, his cane tapping a rhythm of purpose. The discovery of Elias Thorne's cryptic notes hinting at debts, plagiarism, betrayal, and a mysterious African past had sharpened his focus. Today, he resolved, would peel back the layers of Thorne's history for the past. Like a latent image in a dark room, held the key to the present murder. The dining room was a study in strained civility. Lydia Thorne, her face pale beneath her chestnut curls, stirred her tea with mechanical precision. Reginald Hale, his pince-nez glinting, scanned a ledger, his fingers twitching as if the numbers might betray him. Victor Lang, his heavy brows knitted, pushed his plate away, his appetite evidently lost to resentment. Lady Evelyn Carrington, her silk shawl draped elegantly, sipped coffee with a serenity that seemed almost defiant. Clara Voss, standing by the sideboard, arranged pastries with a care that belied her trembling hands. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, each suspect a player in a drama they could not escape. Bon matin, Poirot greeted, his voice cutting through the tension like a well-aimed lens. The storm has passed, but the clouds of mystery remain. Today we shall explore the past of Monsieur Thorne, for it casts a long shadow over his death. I ask for your patience, and your truth. Inspector Japp, entering behind Poirot, grunted. We've got men combing the cliffs again, Poirot. No sign of that blowpipe yet. But those notes you found, its secrets, Africa's, stirring up trouble. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Trouble, mon ami, is where the truth hides. Let us begin with a visit to the library. There, we may find more than books. The manor's library was a cavernous room, its shelves groaning under leather-bound volumes and dusty folios. A portrait of Thorne, taken in his younger days, hung above the fireplace, his piercing blue eyes staring down with an intensity that bordered on accusation. Poirot paused before it, noting the backdrop a jungle scene, with palms and a river that could only be African. This, he murmured, is where we start. Japp, rifling through a desk drawer, produced a bundle of letters tied with twine. Found these tucked behind some ledgers. Old correspondence, looks like, from the 1890s. Thorne's name's on them, but he signed as Elias Thornton back then. Poirot's moustache twitched. Thornton, not Thorne. A change of name, perhaps to escape a past. Let us see what these letters reveal. The letters were a window into a younger Thorne, a man of ambition and recklessness, written from the Congo. In 1895, they detailed his exploits as a big game hunter, his partnerships with traders, and a veiled reference to a tragedy involving a man named Charles Warwick. One letter, addressed to an unnamed friend, hinted at a scandal. Warwick's death was no accident, but I've paid the price in silence. The blowpipe is my reminder. Another mentioned a woman, E.C., whose grief had driven her to England. Poirot's eyes narrowed. E.C., could this be Lady Evelyn Carrington? Japp frowned. You think she's tied to Thorne's past? That's a stretch, Poirot. Not a stretch, mon ami, but a thread. We must pull it gently. Poirot tucked the letters into his pocket. Let us speak to Mademoiselle Voss. She, I suspect, knows more of Thorne's history than she lets on. Clara Voss was found in the studio, sorting glass plates with a precision that seemed to anchor her grief. Her dark eyes flicked up as Poirot and Japp entered, her hands pausing mid-task. Mr. Poirot, she said softly, have you found something? Perhaps. Mademoiselle Poirot replied, his tone gentle but probing. You were close to Monsieur Thorne, his assistant, his confidant. Tell me, what do you know of his time in Africa? Clara's face paled, her fingers tightening around a plate. He rarely spoke of it, only that he hunted there, years ago, before he turned to photography. He said it was a time of mistakes. Mistakes, Poirot pressed, his eyes sharp, such as the death of a man named Charles Warwick. Clara's breath caught her gaze. Dropping, he mentioned Warwick once, late at night, when he'd had too much brandy. Said Warwick was a partner, killed in a hunting accident. Alias Mr. Thorne blamed himself. That's why he kept the blowpipe, as a kind of penance. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. And did he speak of a woman, perhaps connected to this tragedy? Clara hesitated, then shook her head. No, sir. He was private about such things. But, she bit her lip. There was a letter he kept in his desk, locked away. I saw him reading it once, years ago. It had a crest on it, a lion and a rose. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A crest, mademoiselle, most interesting. And where is this letter now? I don't know, Clara admitted. He moved it after I saw it. He was angry, I'd noticed. Japp. Scribbled in his notebook. We'll search his study again. If that letter's here, it might tell us something. The study, a smaller room off the library, was a shrine to Thorne's ego. Framed photographs lined the walls, portraits of dignitaries, landscapes of distant lands, and one striking image of a young woman in tribal attire, her face obscured by shadow. Poirot examined it closely, noting the date, 1895, Congo. Another piece of the puzzle, he murmured. Japp, meanwhile, forced open a locked drawer, revealing a small, sealed envelope with the crest Clara had described, lion entwined with a rose. Poirot opened it carefully, revealing a single page in a feminine hand. Elias, you cannot outrun what we did. Warwick's blood is on us both. I will keep your secret, but at a cost. E.C. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered. Lady Carrington, she is no mere patron. She is a ghost from Thorne's past. Japp's eyes widened. You think she's E.C., that she and Thorne were mixed up in this Warwick business? It is possible, Poirot said. We must confront her, but with care. The past it is. A delicate thing, like a glass plate pressed too hard, and it shatters. Lady Evelyn Carrington received them in the conservatory, her composure as flawless as her pearls. The storm's aftermath had left the glass walls streaked with salt, but she stood among the ferns like a queen in her court. Mr. Poirot, she said, her voice smooth, you seem determined to unearth skeletons. What have you found now? Poirot held up the letter, its crest catching the light. This, madame, speaks of Africa, of a man named Warwick, and of a secret shared with Monsieur Thorne. E.C. These are your initials, are they not? Her smile faltered, her hand tightening. On her shawl. You are thorough, Mr. Poirot. Yes, I knew Elias in Africa. I was young, married to Charles Warwick, a trader. Elias was his partner. Charles died in a hunting mishap, or so it was called. Elias and I. We were close, for a time. But that was 30 years ago. Why dredge it up now? Because, Poirot said, the past, it does not stay buried. This letter suggests a pact, a cost. Did Thorne betray you, madame, as he did others? Her eyes flashed, but her voice remained steady. He promised to leave his wife for me, years later, when we met again in London. But last night, he laughed it off, said I was a fool to believe him. I was angry, yes, but I did not kill him. Poirot nodded, his gaze unwavering. Anger, madame, it is a powerful lens. It distorts, but it also reveals. Mercy for your candor. As evening fell, Poirot sat in the library, the letters and notes spread before him. Japp, pacing, muttered, this. Africa, business, it's a motive, all right. Carrington had reason to hate Thorne, and Hale's debts could have pushed him over the edge. Lang's rivalry, too. But Clarouette's her stake. Poirot's fingers steepled, his eyes half closed. Mademoiselle Voss, she is the enigma. The word legacy in Thorne's notes it suggests a bond beyond employment. We must learn more of her connection to him. He rose, moving to the portrait of the young woman in tribal attire. "This photograph," he said. "It is from 1895, the year of Warwick's death. The face is hidden, but the eyes, they are familiar. Tomorrow we shall ask Mademoiselle Voss about her past, and we shall watch the others for the truth it is stirring." Outside, the sea roared, its waves a reminder of secrets yet to surface. Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, weaving the threads of Thorne's past into a tapestry of motive and murder. Chapter 6. The alibi cracks the dawn over St. Alban's by the Sea was a fragile thing, its light fractured by clouds that lingered like uninvited guests. The manor, perched on the cliffs, stood resolute against the wind's mournful howl, its windows reflecting the sea's restless churn. Hercule Poirot, his morning ritual of tisane and meticulous grooming complete, descended to the drawing-room with a purpose as sharp as his patent leather shoes. The revelations of Elias Thorne's African past, his connection to Charles Warwick's death, the cryptic letter from ECR, and the shadowed figure in the fatal photograph had tightened the web of suspicion around the suspects. Today, Poirot vowed, would expose the cracks in their carefully crafted alibis. For truth, like a flaw in a lens, could not remain hidden forever. The drawing-room was a tableau of strained civility, the air thick with the scent of coffee and unspoken dread. Lydia Thorne sat by the fire, her fingers tracing the rim of a porcelain cup, her face a mask of weary resignation. Reginald Hale, his pince-nez perched precariously, scribbled in a ledger, his movements jerky as if anticipating scrutiny. Victor Lang, his heavy brows knitted, leaned against a bookcase, his eyes darting with barely concealed hostility. Lady Evelyn Carrington, her silk gown shimmering, reclined on a chaise, her composure a delicate veneer over something sharper. Clara Voss, hovering near the door, arranged a tray of pastries with mechanical care, her pale face betraying the weight of her thoughts. Bon matin, Poirot greeted, his voice a clear note in the room's dissonance. "The sea, it speaks of secrets, and so must we. The past of Monsieur Thorne has given us much to consider. Africa, a death, a promise. Broken. But it is your alibis, Mies Amos, that now demand our attention. One of you was outside the studio, captured by the camera's eye. Let us see whose story falters." Inspector Japp, standing by the window, cleared his throat. "We've had no luck with that blowpipe, Poirot. The cliffs, the manor, nothing. But I've got news. The maid, Elsie, says she saw Lang leave the guest room just before 7, not at 7 as he claimed." Lang's head snapped up, his voice a low growl. "She's mistaken. I was in my room, headache and all. Thorne's nonsense drove me to distraction." Poirot's green eyes gleamed. "Distraction, Monsieur Lang, or perhaps opportunity. Let us revisit your movements with precision." In the library, Poirot began with Lang, who sat stiffly, his hands clenched on the armrests of a leather chair. The room's heavy curtains muted the morning light, casting shadows that seemed to echo the photographer's own. "Monsieur Lang," Poirot said, his tone mild but unyielding, "you claim you were in the guest room, suffering a headache, when Monsieur Thorne met his end. Yet the maid places you in the corridor near the studio. Explain." Lang's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Elsie's confused. I stepped out briefly to fetch water, then returned. I wasn't near the studio. Ask anyone else." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching. And yet, the camera saw a shadow outside the window. A rival, perhaps, driven by years of resentment. You accused Thorne of stealing your techniques. Such a grievance, it confessed her. I didn't need to kill him, Lang snapped. My work will outlast his. Check with Elsie again, she'll tell you I was back in my room by the time that... Flash went off. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. We shall verify, monsieur. But know this, the truth, it is like a negative, it develops slowly, but it does not lie. Next, Poirot summoned Reginald Hale to the study, where Thorne's desk still bore the marks of their earlier search. Hale adjusted his spectacles, his fingers trembling slightly. I've told you, Mr. Poirot, I was in the drawing room with Lady Carrington. We were discussing investments, nothing to do with Elias's theatrics. Poirot held up a document from the metal box, its ink faded but legible. This ledger, Monsieur Hale, shows payments from you to Thorne, marked repaid. With interest, yet beside your name, he wrote London dealings. What secrets did he hold over you? Hale's face flushed, his voice rising. Elias was reckless with money, borrowing against our profits. I covered his debts to keep the business afloat. Those dealings were legitimate investments in photographic equipment, studios in London. He was blackmailing me, yes, but over nothing, criminal, just poor judgment. Poor judgment, Poirot echoed, his eyes sharp. Or a motive. Blackmail, it is a dangerous game. Did you tire of paying his price? Hale's hands clenched. I didn't kill him. Lady Carrington will confirm I was with her. We, Poirot said. But alibis, they can be arranged, like a photograph's composition. Mercy, Monsieur Hale. The conservatory was Lady Carrington's domain, its glass walls streaked with salt from the storm. She stood among the ferns, her pearls catching the light, her smile a delicate mask. Poirot entered alone, his cane tapping softly. Madame, he began, your connection to Monsieur Thorne's African past is most illuminating. The letter signed E.C. speaks of a shared guilt, Charles Warwick's death. Yet you claim your anger was only for a broken promise. Tell me, was there more? Her smile tightened, her eyes flickering with something like fear. You are persistent, Mr. Poirot. Yes, Charles was my husband. His death was ruled an accident, but Elias, he was there. We were young, foolish. I blamed him for years, but we reconciled when I returned to England. His betrayal last night hurt, but I was with Mr. Hale when he died. Ask him. Poirot's gaze lingered on her. The photograph, Madame, shows a shadow outside the studio. Your broocher, lion and rose, like the crest on your letter was it worn that morning. Her hand flew to her chest, where the brooch was absent. I don't recall. I have many such pieces. But I was in the drawing room, not skulking. Outside. Skulking, Poirot repeated, savouring the word as he had with Lydia. A curious echo. We shall see, Madame. In the studio, Poirot and Japp re-examined the fatal scene. The camera stood silent, its lens a mute witness to Thorne's end. Poirot knelt by the collection cabinet, noting the curare vial's position untouched since their last visit. This poison, he said, it was Thorne's own. Yet the dart was placed, not fired. Why stage such a scene? Japp scratched his head. To make it look exotic, maybe. Point the finger at Lang with his talk of Thorne's stolen ideas. Or Clara, who knew the cabinet. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Or to conceal a simpler truth. The gasp, Mademoiselle Voss, her debt, suggests not just poison, but surprise. Thorne saw something, or someone, in his final moment. They turned to the mirror, its surface reflecting the room's clutter. Poirot traced the scratch he'd noticed earlier, his gloved finger pausing at a faint smudge of wax. "This," he said, "is no accident. Something was pressed here, perhaps to hold it in place. A clue, Japp, to the shadow's purpose." Japp frowned. "You think the mirror was tampered with?" "I think," Poirot said, "that everything in this room was arranged, like a photograph. The killer, they are an artist of deception." That afternoon, Clara Voss was summoned to the library. She sat across from Poirot, her hands folded tightly, her dark eyes wary. "Mademoiselle," Poirot began, "you have been loyal to Monsieur Thorne, yet his notes speak of legacy beside your name. What bond did you share?" Clara's breath hitched, her voice barely audible. He was my father. My mother was a nurse in the Congo during his hunting days. She died when I was young, and he took me in, but never acknowledged me publicly. I worked for him, hoping he'd claim me as his daughter." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "And did he promise you this legacy? An inheritance, perhaps?" "He said he'd leave me the studio," Clara whispered. "But last week, he changed his mind, said I wasn't ready. I was angry, but I didn't kill him." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. "Anger, mademoiselle, it is a motive. But your truth, it is a piece of the puzzle. Merci." As evening fell, Poirot sat by the fire, the letters and ledger before him. Japp paced, his frustration palpable. Lang's alibis shaky, Hale's hiding something, Carrington's got a past with Thorne, and now Clara's his daughter. "This case is a tangle, Poirot." Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression serene. "A tangle, oui, but the threads are loosening. The shadow in the photograph fit wears a brooch, I am certain. Lady Carrington's alibi, it depends on Hole, and his on her. A conspiracy, perhaps, or a single hand directing the scene." He rose, moving to the portrait of the woman in tribal attire, its date 1895 burned into his memory. "This woman," he said, "she is the key to Thorne's past. And Clara, she is the link to his present. Tomorrow, we shall test these alibis further. The cracks, they are beginning to show." Outside, the sea whispered its secrets, and the manor held its breath, its inhabitants caught in a web of lies that Poirot's little grey cells were determined to unravel. Chapter 7. The hidden negative. The morning light over St. Aldens-by-the-Sea was sharp and unforgiving, cutting through the lingering mist to cast long shadows across the cliffs. The manor, its gothic silhouette etched against the sky, seemed to pulse with secrets, its stone walls guarding the truths Hercule Poirot sought. The revelations of the previous day, Clara Voss's claimed to be Elias Thorne's daughter, the cracks in Victor Lang's alibi, and the damning letter linking Lady Evelyn Carrington to a tragic African past had tightened the web of suspicion. Poirot, his moustache impeccably waxed, descended to the breakfast room with a resolve as precise as his polished cane. Today, he would unearth the hidden truths for the murder of Thorne like a photograph, required only the right developer to reveal its depths. The breakfast room was a study in tension, the clink of cutlery against china the only sound breaking. The silence. Lydia Thorne, her face drawn, sipped tea with a mechanical air, her eyes avoiding the others. Reginald Hale, his pince-nez fogged from the steam of his coffee, scribbled notes in a ledger, his fingers betraying a faint tremor. Victor Lang, his heavy brows furrowed, pushed eggs around his plate, his scowl deepening with each glance at the others. Lady Evelyn Carrington, her silk gown a soft contrast to her steely demeanor, buttered toast with deliberate grace. Clara, Voss, stationed near the sideboard, arranged a tray of fruit. Her pale hands steady, but her gaze haunted. Bon matin, Poirot greeted, his voice a clear note in the strained quiet. The light today, it is most revealing. Nan, we have learned much of Monsieur Thorne's past, his secrets, his debts, his betrayals. But there is more, hidden like a negative in a dark room. Today, we shall bring it to light. Inspector Japp, entering behind Poirot, adjusted his coat. We've turned up something, Poirot. The servants found a locked chest in the attic, tucked behind old props. Could be nothing, but I've got a man fetching it now. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Excellent, mon ami, a chest. It is like the heart, it holds what one wishes to conceal. Let us see its contents. The attic was a cavern of forgotten relics, its air thick with dust and the scent of aged wood. Trunks and crates lined the walls, interspersed with discarded photographic equipment and faded backdrops. The chest Japp had mentioned was small but sturdy, its iron lock rusted but intact. A footman, under Japp's direction, pried it open, with a crowbar revealing a trove of papers, photographs, and glass negatives. Poirot knelt beside it, his gloved hands sifting through the contents with the care of an archaeologist. Mon Dieu, he murmured, holding up a series of negatives. Their images faint but discernible. These are not mere portraits. They are weapons. Japp peered over his shoulder. Weapons. They're just pictures. Not just pictures, Japp, Poirot said, his voice low. These are compromising. Look. He held a negative to the dim light, revealing a grainy image of Lydia Thorne in a dimly lit room, cards strewn before her, a man in a suit counting money. A gambling den, perhaps. Not the pastime of a lady. Another negative showed Reginald Hale shaking hands with a shadowy figure in an alley, a stack of banknotes changing hands. A third captured Victor Lang copying a photograph from a rival's portfolio, his face intent. A fourth showed Lady Evelyn Carrington in an intimate embrace, not with Thorne, but with a younger man, his face obscured. The final negative was of Clara Voss, her signature forged on a document, her expression furtive. Blackmail, Japp said, his voice grim. Thorne was holding these over their heads. We, Poirot agreed, but there is one more. He lifted a final negative, its image startling, Thorne himself, arguing with a figure in a dark coat. The background unmistakably the cliffs of St. Albans. The figure's hand bore a ring, its crest a lion and Rose Lady Carrington's emblem. This, Poirot said, was taken days before his death. Thorne, he was not only a victim, but a player in this game of secrets. Back in the library, Poirot confronted the suspects, the negatives spread before him like a deck of cards. The room was heavy with anticipation, the fire's crackle, the only sound as the group faced the detective's piercing gaze. Madame et messieurs, Poirot began. Monsieur Thorne was no mere photographer. He was a collector of truths or lies. These negatives, found in a hidden chest, reveal your secrets. Madame Thorne, a gambling debt. Monsieur Hale, dubious dealings. Monsieur Lang, plagiarism. Madame Carrington, an indiscretion. Mademoiselle Voss, a forged signature. And yet, there is one image of Thorne himself, arguing with a figure who wears a ring of a lion and rose. Lady Carrington's hand flew to her bare finger, her composure cracking. That proves nothing, Mr. Poirot. Elias and I argued often. He was a difficult man. Difficult, Poirot echoed, or dangerous. This negative places you with him, Madame, days before his death. What was the nature of this dispute? Her eyes flashed. He threatened to expose my friendship. With another, I told him to keep silent, or I'd ruin him. Poirot turned to Lydia. And you, madame. A gambling den did Thorne hold this over you? Lydia's face paled, her voice barely audible. He knew I'd lost money. Yes. He threatened to tell my family, cut me off entirely. But I didn't kill him. Reginald Hale adjusted his spectacles, his voice tight. Those dealings were business, nothing more. Thorne twisted them to look sinister. He wanted control of our partnership. Victor Lang's fists clenched. He stole my work, then mocked me with it. That negative, it's old news. I stopped. Copying years ago, Clara, her eyes downcast, whispered, I forged a letter to a client, once, to help Mr. Thorne. He kept it to ensure my loyalty. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each admission. Mercy, you have given me much to consider. But know this, these negatives, they are motives. One of you turned the lens back on Thorne. In the studio, Poirot and Japp examined the negatives. Under a magnifying glass, the images stark in the afternoon light. The photograph of Thorne and the ringed figure was the most troubling, its details blurred but suggestive. This crest, Poirot said, it is Lady Carrington's, yet she denies being at the cliffs. We must enhance this image. Clara, summoned to assist, worked swiftly in the darkroom, her hands steady as she developed a print. The image clarified. Slightly, Thorne's face was contorted in anger, the figure's posture defiant. The ring was unmistakable, but the face remained obscured. It's not enough, Japp said, frustrated. Could be anyone wearing her ring. Nan, Poirot said, it is her. The posture, the elegance, it is Lady Carrington. But why? Meet Thorne in secret, if not to plot or confront. Japp rubbed his chin. You think she's the shadow in the fatal shot? Perhaps, Poirot said, or perhaps she is one of two. The alibis of Hale and Carrington, they are intertwined. We must test them further. That evening, Poirot sat in the library, the negatives locked in a drawer. Japp paced, his notebook open. These pictures, they give everyone a reason to want Thorne dead. But the locked room, the dart, the missing blow pit doesn't add up. Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression serene. It adds up, mon ami, when you see the composition. The negatives, they are a gallery of motives, but the murder, it is a masterpiece of misdirection. The dart, it was not fired, it was placed. The blowpipe, it is not the weapon but a symbol. We must look to the heart of Thorne's game. He rose, moving to the portrait of the woman in tribal attire, its dated 95, etched in his memory. This woman, he said, she is Clara's mother, I am certain. Her legacy ties Clara to Thorne and to Africa. Tomorrow we shall confront the alibis again, and we shall find the ring that binds this crime. Outside, the sea roared, its waves a chorus to the secrets buried in the manor. Poirot's little grey cells hummed, piecing together a puzzle where every negative held a truth, and every truth a lie. Chapter 8. Tides of Deception. The morning sun over St. Albans by the sea was a pale intruder, its light barely warming the cliffs, where the manor stood like a brooding sentinel. The air carried the salt temps of the sea, mingled with the faint bitterness of secrets that refused to stay buried. Hercule Poirot, his attire as pristine as ever, descended to the drawing room with a mind sharpened by the previous day's discoveries. The hidden negatives, each a snapshot of betrayal, debt, and shame, had painted Elias Thorne as a blackmailer, His camera, a weapon more lethal than the poisoned dart that killed him. The image of Thorne arguing with a figure wearing Lady Lynandro's ring had tightened the noose of suspicion, yet the locked studio and missing blowpipe remained an enigma. Today, Poirot vowed, would see the tides of deception recede, revealing the truth beneath. The drawing room was a silent battlefield, its occupants arranged like pieces on a chessboard, each move calculated to avoid checkmate. Lydia Thorne, her chestnut curls pinned tightly, stared out the window, her tea untouched. Reginald Hale, his pince-nez glinting, clutched a ledger as if it were a shield. Victor Lang, his heavy brows knit in a perpetual scowl, leaned against the mantel, his fingers drumming impatiently. Lady Evelyn Carrington, her silk gown a soft contrast to her steely gaze, sat with the poise of a queen under siege. Clara Voss, pale and withdrawn, stood by the sideboard, arranging a tray of scones with mechanical precision. Bon matin, Poirot greeted, his voice cutting through the room's heavy silence. The sea, it whispers of truths hidden beneath its waves. We have uncovered Monsieur Thorne's secrets, his negatives, his blackmail, his past in Africa. Yet the question remains, who stood outside the studio, a shadow in his final shot? Today, we shall find the answer. Inspector Japp, entering behind Poirot, adjusted his tie. Big news, Poirot. One of my men found something in Lang's luggage case with traces of curare. No blowpipe, mind you, but it's enough to make him squirm. Lang's head snapped up, his voice a low growl. That's a lie. I've never touched curare. Someone's planted it. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Planted, Monsieur Lang? A bold claim. Let us examine this evidence, and then we shall test your alibis once more. In the studio, Japp presented the case a small leather pouch, its interior stained with a faint residue that matched the curare vial in Thorne's cabinet. Lang, summoned to explain, stood rigid, his fists clenched. I've never seen that before, he insisted. Thorne's games were enough to drive anyone mad, but I didn't kill him. Poirot studied the pouch, his gloved fingers tracing its seams. Curare, it is a curious choice. Why use Thorne's own poison, unless to point the finger elsewhere? Tell me, Monsieur Lang, did you tamper with the camera before the fatal shot? Lang's eyes widened, then narrowed. All right, I'll admit it. I loosened a lens the night before. I wanted his test shot to fail, to humiliate him. But I was nowhere near the studio when he died. Ask the maid. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. A small sabotage, yet it places you in the studio, Nan. We shall verify your movements. Next, Poirot and Japp returned to the library, where the negatives from the attic chest lay locked in a drawer. Poirot opened it, selecting the image of Thorne arguing with the ringed figure. This, he said, is our guide. The Lynandros. Crested is Lady Carrington's, yet she denies being at the cliffs. We must press her further. Japp scratched his head. Her alibi's tight. Hale swears she was with him. But that ring's a problem. Could someone else have worn it? Possible, Poirot said, but unlikely. The ring, it is personal, a mark of identity. Let us speak to Madame Carrington. In the conservatory, Lady Carrington stood among the ferns, her pearls catching the light through the salt-streaked glass. Her smile was cool, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease as Poirot presented the negative. Madame, he began, this image shows Monsieur Thorne arguing with a figure wearing your crest. You claim you were in the drawing room, yet the camera places you or your ring at the cliffs. Explain. Her hand touched her bare finger, where the ring was absent. "I lost that ring weeks ago," she said, her voice steady. "Anyone could have found it." Elias and I argued, yes, about his threats to expose my indiscretions. But I was with Mr. Hale when he died. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "A lost ring, madame. Convenient. And yet, the negative is recent. Did you meet Thorne to silence his blackmail?" Her laugh was sharp, like breaking crystal. "You overreach, Mr. Poirot. I had no need to kill him. My wealth protects me from scandal." "Perhaps," Poirot said, "but not from guilt." "Mercy, madame." Back in the drawing room, Poirot gathered the suspects, his presence commanding. Despite his small stature, "Mies, Amos," he said, "the tides of deception are turning. We have found curare in Monsieur Lang's luggage, yet he claims it was planted. We have a negative showing Madame Carrington's ring, yet she denies the meeting. And we have alibis, too perfect, too aligned. Let us revisit your stories." Lydia Thorne spoke first, her voice weary. "I was in the garden, as I said. I saw no one near the studio. Elias's blackmail was cruel, but I had no reason to kill him." Hale adjusted his spectacles, his tone defensive. "I was with Lady Carrington, discussing business. Thorne's demands were heavy, but murder would have ruined me." Clara, her eyes downcast, whispered, "I was outside the studio, waiting. I heard the flash, the gasp. I unlocked the door and found him. I took one negative from his desk. After, it showed my forgery. I wanted to protect myself." Poirot's eyes widened slightly. "You took a negative, mademoiselle." "When, after I found him," Clara said, tears brimming. "I was afraid it would make me look guilty." Japp pounced. "That's tampering with evidence. Where's the negative now?" Clara pointed to a drawer in the sideboard. Japp retrieved a duplicate of the forgery image from the attic. "Why keep it?" he demanded. "I couldn't destroy it," Clara said. "It was his work." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "A brave confession, mademoiselle, but it raises questions. Why only one negative, and why leave the others?" In the studio, Poirot and Japp re-examined the scene. The camera stood silent, its lens a mute witness. Poirot knelt by the mirror, noting the wax smudge he'd found earlier. "This," he said, "suggests the mirror was adjusted, perhaps to capture the shadow deliberately. The killer, they wanted us to see something, or to look away from something else." Japp frowned. "You think the shadow's a trick?" "Not a trick," Poirot said, "but a misdirection. The dart, the blowpipe, the locked room, they are all part of a composition. The true weapon, I suspect, was not the dart, but something simpler." He moved to Thorne's desk, where a teacup sat, its contents long cold. "This," he said, lifting it, "was it tested?" Japp shook his head. "The dart was poisoned. Why bother with the tea?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, mon ami, the dart may be a lie. Send this to your chemist. I suspect we will find more than tea." As evening fell, Poirot sat in the library, the negatives and letters before him. Japp paced his notebook. "Open. Clara's confession throws a wrench in it," he said. "She tampered with evidence, but she's not our killer, is she?" "Nan," Poirot said, "but she is a piece of the puzzle. The negatives, they show Thorne's power over his circle. The ring, it points to Lady Carrington. The curare in Lang's luggage, it suggests a frame, and the tea may be the key." He rose, moving to the portrait of the woman in tribal attire, Its 1895 date a constant reminder. Clara's mother, he murmured. Her legacy ties this all together. Tomorrow, we shall confront the alibis with this new evidence. The tides, they are turning, and the truth, it will not stay submerged. Outside, the sea roared, its waves a chorus to the deception that swirled within the manor. Poirot's little grey cells worked tirelessly, navigating the currents of lies to find the shore of truth. Chapter 9. The mirror's reflection the morning over St. Albans by the sea broke with a deceptive calm. The sea's restless churn softened by a thin veil of sunlight that gilded the cliffs. The manor, its Gothic silhouette stark against the horizon, seemed to hold its secrets closer, as if wary of the revelations Hercule Poirot was determined to unearth. The previous day's discoveries, Clara Voss's confession to taking a negative, the curare-tainted case in Victor Lang's luggage, and the suspicion cast on Lady Evelyn Carrington's ring had tightened the noose of truth around the suspects. Yet the locked studio, the missing blowpipe, and the possibility of poison in Thorne's tea suggested a deeper deception. Poirot, his attire impeccable as always, descended to the drawing-room with a resolve as precise as the click of a camera. Shudder. Today, he would reflect the suspect's lies back at them, for the mirror of truth, like the one in Thorne's studio, revealed all. The drawing-room was a silent arena, its occupants arranged with the strained formality of a staged portrait. Lydia Thorne, her chestnut curls loosened by sleeplessness, sat by the fire, her fingers clutching a handkerchief. Reginald Hale, his pince-nez slipping, pored over a ledger, his nervous energy betraying his calm facade. Victor Lang, his heavy brows furrowed, stood by the window, his fists clenched as if bracing for a blow. Lady Evelyn Carrington, her silk gown shimmering, reclined on a chaise, her pearls a quiet defiance of the accusations circling her. Clara Voss, pale and withdrawn, arranged a tray of tea with mechanical care, her eyes darting toward Poirot as he entered with Inspector Japp. Bon matin, Poirot greeted, his voice a clear note in the room's heavy silence. The light today, it is most illuminating, Nan. We have uncovered secrets, negatives, curare, a ring that points to betrayal. But the mirror in the studio, it holds a reflection of truth. Today, we shall see who it exposes. Japp, adjusting his coat, cleared his throat. We've got results from the chemist, Poirot. The teacup from Thorne's desket had traces of a toxin, not curare, but something slower, a heart stimulant gone wrong. Could have caused a collapse before the dart even hit. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Mon Dieu, Japp, this changes. The picture, the dart, it was not the killer, it was a prop. The true weapon was in the tea. Let us confront this new truth. In the studio, Poirot stood before the mirror, its gilt frame catching the morning light. The scratch and wax smudge he'd noted earlier were faint but telling, suggesting the mirror had been positioned with intent. This, he said, tapping his cane against the floor, was no accident. The mirror was placed to capture the shadow. Outside, but why? To accuse or to distract? Japp frowned, holding the chemist's report. If the tea was poisoned, the dart's just theatre. But who had access to the cup? Poirot turned to Clara, who had followed them, her hands twisting. A cloth, Mademoiselle Voss. You prepared the tea for Monsieur Thorne. Oui. Clara nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, sir. I brought it to his desk before he sent us out. He liked it strong, with sugar. I left it there and went to the corridor. And who else was near the studio? Poirot pressed, his tone gentle, but unyielding. No one, Clara said. The others were in the drawing-room, I'd have seen anyone go in. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Yet the tea was poisoned, and the mirror saw a shadow. Someone was there, mademoiselle, unseen by you but not by the camera. In the library, Poirot gathered the suspects, the air thick with anticipation. He held up the chemist's report, its stark findings a silent accusation. Mes amis, he began. The dart in Monsieur Thorne's neck was not his killer. The tea he drank, laced with a toxin, caused his heart to fail. The dart was placed after, to mislead. Let us revisit your alibis, for one of you, or perhaps, to compose this deadly scene. Lydia Thorne's handkerchief crumpled in her hand. I was in the garden, Mr. Poirot. I didn't touch his tea. Elias's blackmail was cruel, but I had no access to his studio. Poirot's gaze was steady. The garden, madame. It is near the studio window. Did you see no one there? No one, Lydia insisted, her voice firm. The mist was thick, but I'd have noticed. Reginald Hale adjusted his pince-nez. His face flushed. I was with Lady Carrington, as I've said. I never went near the studio. Thorne's debts were a burden, but poisoning him, absurd. Poirot held up the negative of Hale's shady deal. Yet this suggests you had much to hide, monsieur. Did Thorne's demands push you to act? Hale's voice rose. He was bleeding me dry, yes, but I didn't kill him. Ask Lady Carrington, she confirmed my alibi. Lady Carrington's smile was tight, her pearls glinting. Indeed, Mr. Hale was with me. I had no access to Elias's tea, Mr. Poirot. Your mirror may have seen a shadow, but it wasn't mine. Poirot's eyes lingered on her. The ring, Madame, lion, and rose. It was in the negative of Thorne's argument, and perhaps in the fatal shot. You claim it was lost, yet the mirror suggests otherwise. Her hand touched her bare finger, her composure wavering. I told you, I lost it weeks ago. Someone else could have used it. Victor Lang, his voice a growl, cut in. This is nonsense. That curare in my luggage was planted, and I never touched Thorne's tea. I was in my room, as the maid said. Poirot tilted his head. Yet you admit to tampering with the camera, Monsieur Lang. Did you also tamper with the tea, to ensure? His failure was permanent. Lang's fists clenched. I wanted him humiliated, not dead. Check the maid's story, she saw me. Clara, her eyes downcast, spoke softly. I brought the tea, but I didn't poison it. I loved him, even if he didn't claim me as his daughter. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each response. Mercy, the mirror has shown us a shadow, and the tea has revealed a truth. We are close, mes amis, to the heart of this deception. In the studio, Poirot and Japp re-examined the scene, the camera a silent witness to the crime. Poirot knelt by the desk where the teacup had sat, its rim still bearing faint traces of sugar. This, he said, was no random act. The toxin, it was chosen to mimic a heart attack, subtle but deadly. The dart, it was added to confuse. Japp scratched his head. But who could have slipped it in? Clara brought the tea, but she was outside when the flash went off. The others were accounted for. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Accounted for, oui, but alibis, they can be staged. The mirror's reflection, it points to Lady Carrington, yet her alibi holds with Hale. We must test this bond. He moved to the mirror, its wax smudge, a faint clue. This was no accident, he said. The mirror was positioned to capture the shadow, but why? To frame another, or to hide the true act? Japp frowned. You think the killer wanted us? to see the shadow. Perhaps Poirot said, or perhaps they miscalculated. The camera, it is impartial. It saw what the killer did not intend. That afternoon, Poirot requested a reenactment of the fatal morning. The suspects were positioned as they claimed. Lydia in the garden, Hale and Carrington in the drawing room, Lang in the guest room, Clara in the corridor. Poirot stood in the studio, the camera loaded with a fresh plate. "We shall recreate." "The shot," he announced. "The flash, it will illuminate more than the vase." Clara, trembling, ignited the magnesium bulb, its blaze filling the room. Poirot watched the mirror, noting the reflection of the window. No shadow appeared, but the angle was clear. The mirror had been tilted slightly, just enough to catch. "The outside, mon Dieu," he murmured. The killer adjusted this mirror, but they did not expect the camera to betray them. Japp, observing, shook his head. Still no shadow. Maybe it was a fluke. "No fluke," Poirot said. The killer was outside, but they knew the room was locked. The tea, it was poisoned earlier, perhaps when Clara left it on the desk. As evening fell, Poirot sat in the library, the negatives and chemist's report before him. Japp paced, his notebook open. "The tea changes everything," Japp said. The dart was a red herring, but who had the chance to poison it? Poirot sipped his tisane, his expression serene. The tea, it was accessible to all before Clara brought it. To the studio, Hale and Carrington, their alibis are entwined, but the ring-it points to her. Lang's curare suggests a frame, but his sabotage of the camera shows intent. Clara, she is the key, but not the hand that poured the poison. He rose, moving to the portrait of the woman in tribal attire, its 1895 date a constant reminder. "Tomorrow," he said, "we shall confront the killer. The mirror's reflection, it has shown us the truth. The tea, it has named the crime. The little grey cells, they are ready." Outside, the sea roared, its tides a mirror to the deception. Within the manor, Poirot's mind, like a perfectly focused lens, was poised to capture the final image of truth. Chapter 10. The ultimate exposure. The dawn over St. Albans by the sea was a reluctant guest, its light seeping through heavy clouds that pressed against the cliffs like a shroud. The manor, its Gothic spires piercing the sky, stood as a silent witness to the secrets unraveling within its walls. Hercule Poirot, his morning ritual of tisane and meticulous grooming complete, descended to the drawing room with a resolve as sharp as a freshly printed photograph. The previous day's reenactment had confirmed the mirror's deliberate positioning, and the chemist's report had revealed the true weapon. A toxin in Thorne's tea, not the dart. The shadow in the fatal shot, the lion Andro's ring, and the web of alibis pointed to a carefully staged crime. Today, Poirot would expose the killer, for the truth, like a perfectly developed negative, could no longer remain in the dark. The drawing room was a cauldron of tension, the air thick with the scent of coffee and the weight of impending revelation. Lydia Thorne, her chestnut curls dishevelled, sat by the fire, her hands clasped tightly around a cup. Reginald Hale, his pince-nez fogged, fidgeted with a pen, his ledger abandoned. Victor Lang, his heavy brows knitted, leaned against the mantel, his eyes darting with barely concealed dread. Lady Evelyn Carrington, her silk gown pristine, sat with the poise of a statue, her pearls a faint glow in the dim light. Clara Voss, pale and silent, stood by the sideboard, her hands arranging a tray with mechanical precision. Bon matin, Poirot greeted, his voice a clear blade slicing through the silence. "The light today, it is perfect for exposure," Nan. We have learned much. A poisoned tea, a dart that deceives, a mirror that reflects a shadow. The camera has spoken, and now I, Hercule Poirot, will name the murderer. Inspector Japp, standing by the door, adjusted his coat. We've got the chemist's report. Poirot. The toxin in the tea was a heart stimulant, lethal in Thorne's condition. The dart was just chocorari, yes, but placed after death. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Precisely, mon ami. The dart was a misdirection, a theatrical flourish. The true crime was in the tea, and the killer, they are among us. Let us unveil the truth. Poirot paced the room, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm, his presence commanding despite his small stature. Mes amis, he began, this murder was a masterpiece of deception, composed like one of Monsieur Thorne's photographs. The locked studio, the missing blowpipe, the shadow in the mirror, all were designed to confuse. But the little grey cells, they see through the fog. Let us reconstruct the crime. He turned to the suspects, their faces a gallery of fear and defiance. Monsieur Thorne died not from the dart, but from a toxin in his tea, administered before the fatal shot. The dart was placed post-mortem to suggest a dramatic murder. The mirror, it was tilted to capture a shadow outside, but why? To accuse another, or to hide the true act? Lydia Thorne's voice trembled. I was in the garden, Mr. Poirot. I never touched his tea. Elias's blackmail was cruel, but I had no part in this. Poirot nodded, his gaze steady. The garden, madame, it is near the studio, yet you saw nothing. Curious, Nan. Hale adjusted his pince-nez, his voice tight. I was with Lady Carrington, discussing business. Thorne's demands were heavy, but I didn't poison him. My alibi holds. Poirot held up the negative of Hale's shady deal. Your secrets, Monsieur Hale, they gave Thorne power. Did you tire of his leash? Hale's face flushed. He was ruining me, yes, but murder. I'd lose everything. Victor. Lang's growl cut through. That Curari in my luggage was planted. I tampered with the camera, sure, to ruin his shot, but I didn't touch his tea. Poirot tilted his head. Sabotage, Monsieur Lang. It shows intent, yet the tea suggests a subtler hand. Lady Carrington's smile was brittle. I was with Mr. Hale, as he said. The ring in your negative eye told you it was lost. I had no access to Elias's tea. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The ring, madame, and the shadow. The mirror places you or someone with your crest outside the studio. Why, Clara Voss, her voice barely audible, spoke last. I brought the tea, but I didn't poison it. I loved him, even if he wouldn't claim me as his daughter. Poirot paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Mercy for your words, but they are not enough. The killer is here, and the truth is clear. The murderer is Monsieur Reginald Hale, with the complicity of Madame Evelyn Carrington. A gasp rippled through the room. Hale's pince-nez fell to the floor, his face ashen. This is preposterous. I was with Lady Carrington. Lady Carrington's hand froze on her pearls, her composure cracking. Mr. Poirot, you accuse without proof. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Allow me to explain. The tea was poisoned with a heart stimulant, lethal to Monsieur Thorne's weak heart, known to his inner circle. Monsieur Hale, you had access to the tea when Mademoiselle Voss left it in the kitchen, before she brought it to the studio. You knew Thorne's condition, and you chose a toxin that would mimic a natural collapse. Hale stammered. I was in the drawing room. Lady Carrington, Poirot interrupted. Your alibi depends on Madame Carrington, and hers on you. But the mirror tells a different story. The shadow in the fatal shot, it wears your cufflink. Monsieur Hale, a silver initial H glinting in the reflection. You were outside, adjusting the mirror to create a false clue, to point suspicion elsewhere. Hale's voice rose. The cufflink, that's absurd. Anyone could have, Nan, Poirot said, his tone final. The negative is clear. You were there, ensuring the mirror caught a shadow to confuse us. But you miscalculated. The camera captured your cufflink, not just a vague figure. He turned to Lady Carrington. And you, madame, you supplied the toxin. Your herbal collection. It includes plants known to affect the heart. You were in Africa with Thorne when Charles Warwick died. You blamed him, when he betrayed your renewed bond, threatening to expose your indiscretions. You acted. You and Monsieur Hale conspired him. For money, you for revenge. Lady Carrington's face paled, her voice a whisper. You have no proof. The proof, Poirot said, is in the negative, the tea, and your ring. You wore it that morning, despite your claim of loss. The mirror saw you, madame, as did Thorne's camera. Hale broke first, his voice cracking. It was his fault. Thorne was bleeding me dry, threatening to expose my dealings. I couldn't pay forever. I slipped the toxin in his tea, yes, but I didn't mean for the dart. That was her idea. Lady Carrington's eyes flashed, her composure shattered. You coward. Yes, I gave him the toxin, and I placed the dart after Elias killed my husband. In African, an accident, but greed. He deserved to die for that, and for mocking me. Clara gasped, her hands covering her mouth. Lydia stared, her handkerchief falling. Lang's scowl softened, his anger replaced by shock. Japp stepped forward, his handcuffs ready. That's enough. You're both under arrest. Poirot raised a hand. One moment, Japp. Mademoiselle Voss, you took a negative to protect yourself, but you did not kill. Your legacy, it is safe. Clara nodded, tears streaming. He was my father. I only wanted his love. As Japp led Hale and Carrington away, Poirot stood by the window, the sea's roar a distant echo. The camera, he said softly, it is impartial. It captured the truth, even when the killer sought to deceive. Lydia rose, her voice steady. Will there be more, Mr. Poirot? More secrets? None, madame, he said. The negatives are yours to destroy, if you choose. The truth, it is exposed. Outside, the tide receded, revealing the cliff's stark truth. Poirot's little grey cells, ever vigilant, had brought the ultimate exposure to light. Chapter 11. The confessions, like the afternoon sun over St. Alden's by the sea, cast a golden sheen across the cliffs, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill that lingered in the manor's drawing room. The revelations of the morning, Reginald Hale and Lady Evelyn Carrington unmasked as conspirators in Elias Thorne's murder, had left the air heavy with the residue of betrayal. Hercule Poirot, his attire as impeccable as ever, stood by the window, his green eyes reflecting the sea's restless dance. The case was all but closed. Hale had poisoned Thorne's tea, driven by financial desperation, while Carrington, fueled by vengeance for a decades-old wrong, had placed the poisoned dart as a final flourish of deception. Yet Poirot's little grey cells, ever meticulous, sensed a final thread to be tied, a confession to be fully illuminated. Like a photograph brought to clarity in the developer's bath, the drawing room was quieter now, its occupants reduced to 3. Lydia Thorne, Her face pale but composed, sat by the fire, her hands folded in her lap. Clara Voss, her eyes red from tears, stood near the sideboard, her hands idle for the first time. Victor Lang, his heavy brows softened, leaned against the mantel, his anger replaced by a weary acceptance. Inspector Japp, overseeing the removal of Hale and Carrington to the village lockup, had left Poirot to conclude the affair, trusting the detective's knack for extracting the final truths. Mise Amos, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. The crime is solved, the guilty named. Monsieur Hale and Madame Carrington, they wove a tapestry of deceit, poison in the tea, a dart to mislead, a mirror to cast a false shadow. Yet the camera, it did not lie. It captured their guilt, and now we must ensure all is clear. Let us hear the confession's light, for truth, it demands to be seen. Lydia Thorne looked up, her voice steady but soft. Mr. Poirot, you've done what Elias never could, brought clarity to chaos. But what happens now? His secrets, those negatives, will they haunt us still? Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile beneath it. The negatives, madame, are yours to decide. Destroy them if you wish, for their power died with Thorne. But first, let us hear from those who remain. He turned to Clara, her pale face a canvas of grief and relief. Mademoiselle Voss, you are the daughter of Elias Thorne, a truth he withheld but you cherished. You took a negative to protect yourself, yet you did not kill. Is there more you wish to say? Clara's hands trembled, but her voice held firm. I knew about the blackmail. He showed me the negatives once, said they were his insurance. I hated how he used people's weaknesses. When I found him dead, I took the one of me, the forgery, because I was afraid. But I couldn't destroy it. It was his work, his art, even if it was cruel. Poirot nodded, his eyes kind but piercing. You sought to preserve his legacy, even in death. A daughter's love, it is a powerful thing. And the letter, the one with the Lion Andro's crest, did you know of it? Clara shook her head. Not until you found it. He kept it hidden, like so much else. I think he was ashamed of his past, of what happened in Africa. Oui, Poirot said, and that shame, it cost him his life. Mercy, mademoiselle. He turned to Victor Lang, whose scowl had softened into something like resignation. Monsieur Lang, you tampered with the camera, seeking to ruin Thorne's final shot. Yet you were not the killer. Have you more to add? Lang's shoulders slumped, his voice low. I hated him, Mr. Poirot. He stole my work, my pride. I loosened the lens to make him fail, to show the world he wasn't perfect. But when I heard he was dead, I felt nothing, just empty. That curare in my luggage, it wasn't mine. Hale or Carrington must have planted it to frame me. Poirot's gaze was steady. A frame, to divert suspicion. Your rivalry was real, but your hands are clean of murder. You are free to rebuild your name. Lang nodded, his eyes distant. I'll try, but Thorne's shadow it's long. Japp returned, his face flushed from the wind. Hale and Carrington are in custody. Poirot, Hale's singing like a canary, blaming Carrington for the dart idea. She's quieter, but she's admitted to the toxin. Says it was revenge for her husband's death in Africa. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Their confessions, they confirmed the picture. But let us hear it in full. Bring them here, Japp, one last time. Hale and Carrington were led in, their wrists bound, their faces a contrast of defeat and defiance. Hale's pince-nez hung crookedly, his voice trembling. It was her idea, Poirot. Thorne was bleeding me dry debts, threats, those cursed negatives. I slipped the toxin in his tea, yes, but the dart that was Evelyn's flourish. She said it would point to Lang or Clara. Lady Carrington's eyes flashed, her voice cold. Don't play the innocent, Reginald. You wanted him dead as much as I did. Elias killed my husband, Charles, in Africa, not an accident, but a betrayal over ivory profits. I carried that hate for 30 years. When he mocked our affair, threatened to expose me, I gave you the toxin. The dart was my signature, a nod. To his own blowpipe, Poirot nodded, his expression serene. A signature, madame, but a mistake. The camera saw your shadow, your ring. The tea betrayed your poison. You composed a crime, but the lens exposed you both. Hale's voice broke. I didn't want to kill him. Not at first, but he left me no choice. Carrington's laugh was bitter. No choice. We chose, Reginald, and we lost. Japp signaled to the constables, who led them away. Poirot turned to Clara, who stood trembling. Mademoiselle, your father's willet names a charity, but a codicil grants you the studio, if you prove your lineage. You are his legacy. Clara's tears fell freely. I only wanted him to see me. Now I have the studio, but it feels empty. Lydia rose, her voice soft. I'm leaving, Mr. Poirot. The negatives, the manner they're Clara's now. I want no part of his world. Poirot bowed slightly. A wise choice, madame. The past, it is best left behind. As evening fell, Poirot stood in the studio. The camera, a silent witness to the truth. The mirror, its wax smudge, faint, reflected the room's empty order. The confession's light, he murmured, it illuminates all. Thorne's art was his weapon, but it was also his downfall. Japp joined him, his notebook closed. You did it again, Poirot. That mirror, the two saw what we missed. Mustache twitched. The little grey cells, Japp, they see what the heart conceals. The camera, it was the true detective. Outside, the sea whispered its approval, its tides carrying away the last echoes of deception. The manor stood silent, its secrets laid bare, as Poirot prepared to depart, the case resolved in the light of truth. Chapter 12. The little grey cells triumpher, twilight over St. Alden's by the sea, draped the cliffs in a velvet hush. The sea's restless murmur, a faint echo of the storm that had passed. The manor, its Gothic silhouette, softened by the fading light, stood as a monument to the secrets it had yielded. Hercule Poirot, his Homburg hat tilted precisely, stood on the terrace overlooking the waves, his cane resting lightly in his gloved hands. The case of Elias Thorne's murder was solved. Reginald Hale and Lady Evelyn Carrington, bound by greed and vengeance, had confessed to poisoning Thorne's tea and staging the dart to deceive. Clara Voss, revealed as Thorne's daughter, had inherited his legacy, while Lydia, Thorne, and Victor Lang were free to walk away from the shadow of his blackmail. Yet Poirot, ever meticulous, felt the need to reflect, to ensure every detail of the puzzle was in place, for the triumph of the little grey cells was not merely in solving the crime, but in understanding its composition. Inside. The drawing room was nearly empty, its grandeur dimmed by the absence of its former occupants. Clara Voss sat alone by the fire, her hands folded around a photograph, a portrait of her mother, the woman from Thorne's African past. Lydia had departed for London. her bags packed with the resolve to leave Thorne's world behind. Lang, too, had gone, vowing to rebuild his reputation in the shadow of his rival's death. Inspector Japp, preparing to escort Hale and Carrington to Scotland Yard, joined Poirot on the terrace, his coat buttoned against the evening chill. "Well, Poirot," Japp said, his voice gruff but warm, "you've done it again." Hale and Carrington are locked up, their confessions solid as stone. The tea, the dart, that blasted Mirror saw through it all. "How do you do it?" Poirot's green eyes twinkled, his moustache curving in a faint smile. "Mon ami Japp, it is the method, always the method. The little grey cells, they observe. They arrange, they see the pattern where others see only chaos. The camera, it was the true witness, but the mind it interprets the image." Japp chuckled, shaking his head. "That mirror business Hale's, cufflink Carrington's ring. I'd have missed it entirely. And the tea, who'd have thought the dart was just a prop?" "Precisely," Poirot said, his cane tapping the terrace stones. "The dart, it was a flourish, a distraction to point us toward Africa, toward Lang. Or Clara, but the tea, it was the quiet killer, chosen for Thorne's weak heart. Hale, he sought freedom from debt. Carrington, revenge for a husband's death. Together, they composed a murder, but they forgot the camera's impartial eye." Japp nodded, his notebook tucked away. "Clara's got the studio now, poor girl. Think she'll keep it?" Poirot's gaze softened, turning toward the sea. "Mademoiselle Voss, she carries her father's art, but not his cruelty. The studio, it is her chance to create, not destroy. The negatives, they are in her hands. She will decide their fate." Inside, Poirot approached Clara, who looked up from the photograph, her eyes red but resolute. "Mr. Poirot," she said, softly, "you've given me more than I expected. The truth, the studio, it's overwhelming." Poirot bowed slightly, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle, your father's legacy is yours to shape. The negatives, they are a burden you may release. Your mother's portrait is a reminder of love, not shame." Clara's fingers traced the photograph, a woman in tribal attire, her eyes hauntingly familiar. "She loved him, you know, despite everything. I want to make the studio something she'd be proud of." Poirot's smile was warm. "Then you shall, mademoiselle. The little grey cells, they see your strength." As Poirot and Japp prepared to depart, they returned to the studio one final time. The camera stood silent, its lens reflecting the dying light. The mirror, its wax smudge, faint, leaned against the wall, a mute witness to the crime. Poirot paused. Before it, his reflection sharp against the tarnished glass. "This," he murmured, "was the key. The killer sought to control the image, but the mirror betrayed them." Japp scratched his head. "You knew it was Hale and Carrington from that cufflink and ring, didn't you? How'd you spot them in that blurry reflection?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The details, Japp. The cufflink, it was unique to Hale Silver H, he wore with pride. The ring, it was Carrington's emblem, worn that morning despite her claim of loss. The camera captured what they could not hide, and the tea was the silent partner in their crime." Japp grinned. "You're a marvel, Poirot. Scotland Yard could use you full time." Poirot waved a hand, dismissing the notion. Nan, mon ami. The Yard, it has its methods, and I, mine. The little grey cells, they thrive in the quiet moments, not the clamour of bureaucracy." As the train to London pulled away from St. Alden's station, Poirot sat by the window, the cliffs fading into the twilight. Japp, across from him, dozed, his notebook slipping from his lap. Poirot's mind, however, was awake, replaying the case like a series of photographs. The locked studio, the poisoned tea, the dart's deception, the mirror's truth. Each detail had fallen into place, guided by the impartial lens of logic. The camera, he murmured, it sees what the heart conceals. Thorne, he was an artist of blackmail, but his final shot captured his own downfall. The train rattled on, carrying Poirot back to the city, where new puzzles awaited. Behind him, the manor stood silent, its secrets exposed, its shadows banished by the triumph of the little grey cells. The sea whispered its approval, a timeless chorus to a truth well won.